way. Who are these presumptuous people? Where and how did they receive or invent their usual sense of the word? And how has their sense of the word acquired such widespread acceptance that speakers still find it necessary to formally dissociate from it? American culture, by the term pluralism, has clearly embraced the threefold notion that there are, yes, many different religions, that they are all somehow comparable to one another, and crucially, that they are all more or less welcome in the United States. Has this embrace been all along a huge cultural mistake? Finally, I had to wonder, when speakers dissociated themselves from the term religion, did the dissociation actually quite work? It often seemed to me that speakers who repudiated the applicability of the word religion to their particular unreligion would later circle back and use the word in spite of themselves, in the very sense that they had repudiated. However objectionable, had the word in the usual sense become somehow unavoidable or indispensable. The phrase, "as we know it," in the title of this book refers to religion as we talk about it. The title thus refers to the very sense of the word religion that I have just now been discussing. Early in my introduction to the Norton Anthology of World Religions, the reader encounters the following deliberately casual and unchallenging sentence. "What is religion? The word exists in the English language, and people have some common-sense notion of what it refers to. Most understand it as one kind of human activity, standing alongside other kinds, such as business, politics, warfare, art, law, sport, or science." My decision for the organization of the Norton Anthology of World Religions was that we would begin with this common-sense notion rather than with a theoretically ambitious definition of religion, an academic definition that I would then be required to impose on my 6 associate editors, each of whom was far more learned than I about one of the 6 traditions anthologized. My decision was, first, to acknowledge that various competing academic theories of religion do exist, and that they define the word quite differently. Second, to note that no theory, no definition, has acquired universal acceptance. But then, third and at length, to proceed to give this very common-sense notion, however academically objectionable it might be, as plausible a history as I could manage, stretching back to its very beginning and forward at the very end to the American 20th century. The result was an origin story, the origin story of this book's subtitle. What makes the everyday American understanding of religion objectionable when extended to cultures very different from the American or European can be traced to the phrase, "one kind of human activity alongside other kinds." This ostensibly innocuous phrase has an explosive, disruptive potential because it asserts that religion stands indeed alongside the other activities mentioned. In other words, that it is separable from and distinguishable from them. But this is just the assertion that turns out to be objectionable when applied to religions. The term immediately comes into question, that are practiced in a way or in a context that makes them indistinguishable and inseparable from business, politics, warfare, law, and so forth, down a familiar list of human activities, including even entertainment, not to speak of such larger background realities as language, calendar, marriage, diet, and nationality. Over the years, those speakers whom I had found most clarifying and instructive, though they may have puzzled me at the time, were those who adopted a stance of disputatious protest against either Christian missionary activity or related Western colonialism and continuing cultural hegemony. Such would be my experience when I would hear an Indian speaker say, "What you people call Hinduism is for me just part of being Indian," or when I would hear a Jewish speaker say, "Judaism is not a religion, Judaism is a way of life." Hopi religion exists only in the Western Hemisphere, but I once heard a student of that religion say, and with good reason, "The Hopi do not have a religion in the Western sense of the word." Western, in that sentence, referred not to geography but to culture, namely to the European culture that started to spread around the world with the great Spanish and Portuguese explorers of the late 15th and 16th centuries, and went on through later colonialism and the spread of Western ideas of all kinds to dominate much of the world. This culture, Western culture, has long approached religion in a way profoundly shaped by Christian assumptions, and Christianity had indeed, and very early on, introduced a separation of what it chose to regard as religiously significant from the rest of its adherents' worldly lives.